Hey Vic,
Hello, brother.
what's going on?
It's getting cold.
Here in Colorado it is.
Yeah, it's been cold. I'm
It's like
freezing.
a real fall season, huh?
It's horrible. I did not sign up for this.
Yeah, yeah. And especially here in this region, you get like these 30 to 40 to 50 degree swings. So, it's like 80 degrees in the daytime and then like 40 degrees at night. 40-degree difference.
It's ridiculous.
It's freaking crazy. So, what are we talking about today?
Balls, and more balls.
Oh, man, I don't want to talk about balls.
All right, we'll talk about sports instead.
Sports. So, what about sports? What do we know about sports? Sports, people are crazy. People are fanatics. That's one way to describe sports, right? And how
Sports
people
are extreme.
extreme and people become fans of it become fanatics. They become consumed with the sports.
They bleed whatever team color they are.
Right. Yeah, they'll
In
like-
Austin, people bleed orange.
right, and they're like ride or die for their team, right? So you have people that will, just kind of outfit their whole personality with their team, per se, and especially being from Texas, with kids, I remember. Growing up, it was like the thing to do. You had to play sports. Football was the thing, especially in Texas. Football is key in growing up. You got to play football. You got to learn how to play. That's what you grow up and do. And the high schools have outrageous, what do they call them?
Programs?
Programs. Yeah, their team sports programs. They have outrageous football programs.
Yeah, like for example, San Marcos High School.
Well, before you get to that, real quick, let me explain just a little bit because I know where you're kind of going with it. But when I was growing up, our football team was in high school because we had access to a actual college football stadium. We would actually play in that football stadium, and that football stadium would get so freaking packed up, and it was like a university. I don't know. I think their enrollment was like 30,000 or something like that at the time.
Pretty high.
And so this is a high school playing at that stadium. They were packing in just as much fans as the college team, and so yeah, it's pretty crazy. So they got away from that, and that was about the time when you started getting into high school.
Yeah, the era of video games.
Well, what did they do like in sports before the video games? So, what did they do in the sense of sports?
So
When we stopped playing in that stadium, what was
so I still remember going to that stadium and having to go perform there and stuff like that for other stuff. But eventually, I think that ended around
they
my
built
sophomore
they
year.
built a new
yeah,
school.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
They built a new school, and the new school was supposed to have this big, huge field. I never experienced that, but you did. So
Yeah,
can you?
well, they
kind of
had this little
elaborate?
track and field, right? That's what they were using to practice. But then, at the end of my sophomore year, the beginning of my junior year, they said that they were going to get all this funding to build a whole new stadium just for the high school. And because you're in Texas, it's bigger is always everything's always bigger. They ended up building this massive complex, which is basically the size of of a a live stadium. Actually, I want to say the stadium was on par with the college stadium,
Right.
and that they could actually have games there. And so,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing is that they had to accommodate this fan base that was already occupying a college size stadium.
yeah.
And so, but one of the other things that kind of stood out to me was that screen.
Yes, so that screen I was going to get to. That screen is the third largest jumbotron, is that what they're called?
Yeah,
Jumbotron.
Jumbotron. Yeah,
It's the third largest jumbotron in Texas.
Yeah, that
like,
is
why?
crazy
For a high school,
right?
why?
A high school.
Here's the catch, though. Our football team wasn't even that great.
No,
No, they
they've
were
never
horrible.
really been great.
No.
They've been okay and maybe taken some titles here and there, but they've never been astounding or nothing.
No.
It's just what we're talking about. It's just that these programs are so freaking huge. They consume, and it's like, if you're a parent and you have a kid that's well, first of all, if you're a parent that may have experienced a program like that and lived through it, and now you have a kid, and now your kid is looking forward to going into that program, you're pushing that for him. You're like, you want that, like. It's like, yes, you're gonna go play and you're gonna represent for the team, the same team I played for, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is very heavy in lifestyle there in Texas. May not be like that in all parts of the country, but definitely in football country it is like that.
Football country.
So you get a lot of these kids doing a lot of these things, and one thing I remember being very young, I did play football in junior high, and it was mainly because everybody else was doing it. All my friends were doing it, so I was like, well, then I don't want to take just a regular old gym class. I might as well get into athletics as well. And so you join in, your buddies, you're all young, you're out there playing, doing whatever. Some of y'all kind of know what's going on because you may have been on what do they call them, after school program or whatever.
Yeah.
And if not, you're kind of just learning or whatever. But yeah, you're in there and you're all competing and everybody's trying to be the best because, again, you got all this fan base, you got all the support, all these people putting money into it, booster clubs and all kinds of stuff. And
well, we have it called plates. I'm not sure what
what is plates?
Like you have plates. You go get a plate.
Oh,
yeah. I don't know what they're
like
called.
fundraisers.
Yeah.
Yeah, fundraisers and stuff like that. Yeah, booster clubs. They're basically trying to raise money for the program. But what I remember being in there is that, the kids, they push themselves. And the coaches, too. I remember one of my greatest lines from there was, the coach would push you and push you and push you. And it was like, I don't know how much more I can do with this. And the coach is looking at you like, do you want to live forever? Like, no, not necessarily, but do I want to die today? It's almost like the question he was posing, right? But anyways, they're pushing you to the limit. And when you got these young kids out there on the field and really pushing it, you risk injuries.
Yeah.
Injuries. You got young guys. I remember one of my teammates, really young, about 13, 14 years old, something like that, got hit and messed up his back, And I remember in high school, he just couldn't play no more in high school. Very short-lived career, a year or two, something like that. And then he just wasn't able to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, now in retrospect, he's older, and now you can see where, his kid is in sports, and it's like, how are you going to push your kid? In which direction are you going to push your kid? Are you going to push them to, be in these more aggressive, extreme kind of sports where they can risk injury? Or do you start looking for an alternative, other kind of sports that may not be so aggressive?
Yeah, those are the decisions y'all kind of were finding out, or I shouldn't say decisions, those are consequences you guys were kind of finding out. As versus to me, which my generation already kind of knew something was going on. Like, hey, you go into sports, something's gonna break.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that when I was, because we're talking about about 15 to 20 years difference, and what's happening here from my experience to your experience, and all of these things, like for instance, even in all the way up into the NFL, where you got a lot of these reports of football players having concussions and risking their mental health and or their livelihood. They could ultimately even die from this. So we get at in what direction are sports heading with this, with all this stuff coming out and a new generation like yours is coming out knowing this and
So
saying, making those decisions like, I don't
so
think I want to get involved in that.
people are not gonna want to hear this, but essentially sports are gonna die off in the next 2 generations, 3 at most. I'm not gonna say they're gonna completely disappear from the world, but they're definitely not gonna be the biggest things
Right, they're not
what's
going to be
happening
so
that people are watching.
right.
For many reasons. The first reason being that my generation understands that, hey, if you go in sports, you're more likely going to get a concussion or you're going to break a bone. And that was kind of my dilemma going through school, is that I was not put into a situation, but I had stumbled into a situation that I didn't really want to get into. It was like lunchtime, and I picked up my cousin, right, and he was on the football team, and we were in middle school at the time, and apparently his coach saw us, and he was telling my cousin like, "Hey, do you know that kid?" referring to me, and he's like, "Yeah, he's my relative." Like, he's like, "All right, see if you can get him on the team." So my cousin came up to me the next day, and he's like, "Hey, man, coach saw you pick me up real easy," and I'm like, wants to know if you want to be on the team, and I'm like, nah. And it's like, why? And it's like, because you're afraid of getting a broken bone or anything. He's like, man, you're big, you'll be good, whatever. And I'm like, nah, man, because then that means I can't go home and play video games. Like, and that leads to the second part of it, is that video games are essentially not going to take over the world, but they're getting big.
Well,
They are getting really, really big. I don't want to say in terms of international players and this and that just yet, but they're getting big enough to the fact where they're hosting these competitions for these 16-year-olds, 12-year-olds, whatever. For example, Fortnite. And if you don't know video games, Fortnite is a free-to-play game that's a battle royale where it's 100 people versus each other, and you can either work in teams of 2, 4, or by yourself. So it's 100 individuals competing for something. Well, this game blew up so much that they had a live tournament for it, and I believe it was a kid. He was 16 years old, won $3 million.
so there's money in the industry.
There's money in the industry, definitely.
And that's one of the things that would make somebody decide, I may not want to go into sports.
Well, yeah, and here's the reason. And we get it from both sides, and parents can relate to this. My kid doesn't want to play outside. He's always inside playing on his video games or on his phone looking at video games. And they're just like, I don't understand it. Well, that's them training. Like if they were training for football, that's them doing their runs and drills.
Right.
And the other thing is that if kids don't want to go outside, parents necessarily nowadays don't encourage their kids to go outside.
Yeah.
It's more like, as soon as you get off the bus, come straight home. Don't let anyone in the house. I'll be home by 6 o'clock tonight. Whatever. Or hey, I don't want you outside past a certain time, or you have to be inside by a certain time.
Yeah.
And so it's just like kind of not forcing kids to go into this industry, but like kind of leading them to, kind of guiding them to this industry.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, that's definite. I remember growing up. I mean, of course, you can argue the fact that when I was growing up, there wasn't no technology, so you had to be outside. But I do also know that a lot of the stuff that we would do outside just doesn't really exist anymore. For instance, just kind of riding around, driving your bike and stuff like that. It was just
I remember
normal.
doing that.
Well, that was something, very, very normal. And like kids nowadays can't just go out there and ride their bike, as freely as they used to.
Yeah, I remember me and my cousins used to do that. We'd go outside because there'd be all of us. There'd be 5 of us, and at my grandma's house, and then there'd be like the neighborhood kids. There'd be like 2 or 3 neighborhood kids that'd be outside too, and so we'd all play together, play basketball, ride bikes, do something.
Exactly.
But I was in that generation where we went from playing outside to staying inside.
Yes, but then I could say this too. Even just being on the bike, even being on a skateboard, I remember instances, and I even have the scars to this day. You mess around, you're doing stuff, you fall off, you get hurt.
Yeah.
And that's possibly one of the things of why parents don't want to let their kids out on a bike unsupervised. They come back in, they're hurt. they're trying to overprotect them and not allow this kind of stuff to happen to them. And yeah, that leads up into having them stay inside, play on the video games. It's competitive, the games are competitive, and so you get that aspect from them. And now it's being monetized. Now there's a place for you to go ahead and make money from this now. It's not like you're just playing just to play. And I think ultimately, even I think the league knows. I think like the NFL knows.
Oh, they already know.
Right? They know.
Yeah,
like,
so
they have to be on board with this
yeah,
stuff.
so they saw how they're seeing how big this video game industry gets, and it is a big industry. It's more than I think a couple of sports organizations. Like, I don't think it's big as the NFL, but it's big like who are they? The NBA, hockey, soccer, and some other organizations put together. It's bigger than all of them, and maybe even the NFL. It could be. Anyways, point being is that the industry is so big and the people are starting to go ahead and take notice of this. Two things are happening as a result. One, people are buying in, like the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys have a training center, right? And in that training center, they had a new department where it's dedicated just to esports. So it's kids in there with these big old monitors with the best controllers, best headsets, and they're playing video games. And that's what they do. And they're sitting alongside these football players who are also going ahead and doing the physical work of it. And so it's a weird industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so I guess you can kind of see it as
Well,
the football players getting the stats or making the stats right, and then the actual person playing the video game is like, yeah, but I can maneuver you so much more better.
Yeah.
Based on your stats, and so
right.
I can use you to your fullest potential.
Exactly.
And so it is interesting.
Yeah, it is. And this
it's almost
this,
would say that these kids could be the coaches.
Yeah, well,
to an extent.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But what you're also describing is what's happening right now is this transitional period where we're going from playing live in arenas with live players the way we normally do. Everybody gathers for Sundays and all that kind of stuff, but they're realizing, the Dallas Cowboys are realizing that this is where things are heading, and so they're putting in all this money like that, and having a training facility is gonna be what leads up to what will become from this, But yeah, there's definitely a big shift in what kids are getting into. I mean, even if you do get into sports as a kid nowadays, so many of them are non-competitive. They take a lot of the competitiveness out of it.
Oh yeah, I've heard about sports like that where they play like football or soccer and they don't keep track of the score.
Yeah, no track of score.
Yeah.
There's really no winner, no losers, just participation awards, participation trophies, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's more so just kind of like physical activity for the most part.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily a competitive sport.
Yeah, and that's cool for younger kids and all that, but that doesn't necessarily happen in the real world. So,
what do you mean?
Like, people in the real world don't really view, I should say, a participation trophy to an adult doesn't mean the same thing as it would to a kid. With a kid, it means, hey, I did something, I was there, I'm a part of something, I have this like interconnectedness with them. Versus an adult, it's just like, I wasn't even ranked. Like, I wasn't even there. They could take me away and put someone else there, and they could have got that participation trophy instead. So.
Yeah, well, of course, you're not going to have a participation trophy for somebody who's competing.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying, is that they're taking away the competitive edge from these sports.
Yeah.
And so as you're growing up and you're looking for that competitiveness, you can't do it in sports. You won't be able to do it in sports, rather. And so the next thing that seems to be popping up is this gaming, sports and gaming.
So the other thing that it was going into, other than people buying into this industry, is people advancing it. So there's this company called Oculus Rift, and or I should just say Oculus, and the Rift is basically this headset. This is headset which allows you to see VR, and yes, VR does exist. It's already a game. They have a thing called VR chat. Go look that up. That's an interesting concept of a social experiment in itself. But anyways, this VR headset you put on, and then they're going ahead and they're making this. It's called Oculus Ocean or something like that. And basically, what it is their R&D department, and they set up these. They have a room, and they set up these squares, right? And it's just like it looks like a Tetris kind of game, where you have like a box, 3 boxes in a line, and then 1 box on top of the end one, and so that's basically like cover, and they got like a couple of those in there. And then there are these people with this Oculus headset on, and they're going ahead and they are basically playing a horde match, which is basically zombies are coming for you, and you have to defend yourself. And so that's one way where they're going ahead and using this technology, and then from there they're actually saying that it is feasible, that they just need the funding from someone to build a stadium in which these players can go ahead and have these basically full tracking sensors on them, and they can actually play in these matches on a stadium level.
Yeah, and I see what you're getting at, that they are pushing towards that direction. So, what that company you said is named Oculus?
Yeah.
So, do they have any ties to the present gaming or past gaming history?
Are
Like
they
to any other big name titles or companies or whatever, production companies?
the biggest ones are going to be like Sony, which is going to be PlayStation, and then also PC gaming. So,
Okay.
oh, here it is. I was trying to think about their biggest title. Their biggest title right now that everyone would be familiar with is basically going to be the lightsaber game. They sell it at Best Buy, but basically you get this headset and these 2 kind of controllers, right? And
But I'm saying, are they connected to any game from your regular console?
no, not regular games just yet. So they're basically going to
No,
go
no,
ahead.
no, no. Prior to all this, have they produced anything that you could be like, oh yeah, they produced that game back in the day? You remember this game from back in the day?
As far as I know, no.
So they're a new company.
Yes, they're a new company.
Okay.
They've been around for a
That's
while.
what I'm
but
asking, is that whether or not they have any ties to like anybody else in the industry, to kind of get an idea of, oh, well, these are the guys that brought you this, and this. So
No, these are basically brand new guys. Really, they're selling the technology. They're not.
well, I'm pretty sure they've done something. They're not brand new. I'm wondering what entities they may have.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
connections to.
That they've been around for a while, and prior to this kind of video game, they weren't really sure, more than likely, what they were gonna do, because like I said, it's still a virtual world, so it's this thing that has to be created, and it leads into other avenues.
Yeah, I
like,
get that. I was just wondering, like,
how they
if,
produce game
well,
titles.
no,
and
no,
stuff
no.
like that.
Like, if these guys have worked on this project and this project, more than likely they can get funding from here and here, and that's what we would be
Oh no,
looking forward to
So
in the future.
and that's the other argument, is that the gaming industry, is so messed up right now. It's focused on microtransactions and these free to play games like Fortnite.
Okay, so I get that too, but
They're not going to put money into this.
who's not going to put money into it?
Those companies that are pushing these free to play games.
Okay,
with
so a free to play
microtransactions.
game is with microtransactions is essentially a game designed to make money.
Yes.
So why would they not use that money to put it into something like Oculus?
Because it's a lot of upfront money with not a high amount of return yet. Because again, like I said, they're still in their early stages of all this stuff. So it's not like
So
this.
what do you think they're putting their money into right now that would be heading towards professional electronic sports?
They're probably going to put their money into more of these bigger free to play games.
So would you say that the gaming industry is investing in more games, or are they investing in a sports type setting?
No, they're investing in these microtransactions. It's weird, but they're putting their money into these microtransactions versus everything, and that's the biggest argument happening right now.
So who's putting all the money into like trying to get these people to train for this kind of stuff and create a league?
A league?
Yes, of these new electronic sport players.
So you're talking about how the whole thing's set up, or
Essentially, like, I mean, I know this exists. Like you said, they have a live competition.
so yeah, you have your sponsors and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
which go ahead and pay you. So they're like basically like a football team, if you want to think about it like that. They have their sponsors and everything, which kind of put them into these arenas and stuff like that, and pay
But
for
there
their
has
gear
to be
and
some
stuff
kind
like
of
that.
tech people involved with all this stuff.
Oh, like who's funding them individually?
No, like, I mean, there has to be some kind of, like, you're not going to have a Fortnite competition and not have Fortnite come out here and represent. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, so is Fortnite promoting that, or is somebody like totally different, like, oh, I'm an electronic sports player and I'm going to make my whole Fortnite tournament, and it has nothing to do with the Fortnite people?
No,
But we're
okay.
gonna,
So those people would be like big companies like Microsoft, Sony, let's see, Nintendo, all those big guys. They go ahead and they fund these complexes and these arenas and stuff like that. And the developers too, the studio names, they go ahead and put money into that as well. And from there, those are all the big names in the industry, the developers and the distributors, right? Okay.
well, I want to get into more, so I want to get
Like,
deeper into
actual tech companies that put money into this.
yeah, like who are the actual people that are like putting this stuff together, that are looking towards making this into an actual league, and you know, what they've done in the past and what they have planned for the future.
Yeah.
Because yeah, that is ultimately what.
So like the people who fund Oculus
Mm-hmm.
are going to be companies like, I know for sure Sony is going to fund them because that's just who they have ties with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure about anyone else, but again, you're essentially talking about an industry to come up from the last, like, what, 30 years, realistically, the last 20, 30 years,
Yeah.
and to go ahead and take over this NFL kind of industry, which is like everyone knows about the Super Bowl. So it's
Yeah, I don't think
it's
gonna,
kind
like,
of like
yeah, it's not gonna.
intimidating, being like, I don't think this investing in this little industry is going to go ahead and overtake this one, where these people are paying millions of dollars for
Yeah,
advertising.
I see that as well, but I'm trying to propose the idea that this thing could take off, just like everything else in technology that starts off as just some little idea and
That's
then
what I'm
just
saying, like-
spawns into something way bigger. You know, if that is possible, if that's likely to happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is
You
that
know,
these people are saying it's possible to do this, but we need a lot of upfront money to get it done. Yeah, that's the issue.
interesting.
But the issue again comes back to these developers and these corporations don't want to put money into this because
I
it's
don't know, man. I see it like
they do, but they really don't. They want to push these microtransactions.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying, and I get that from that company, and that's why I'm wondering who are the people behind this electronic sports, because if you go ahead and say, you know what, I'll just use your game, and I'll go ahead and get with all these other company owners who already own professional sports teams and set up a model. Like, for instance, you use the Dallas Cowboys and you say, hey, I need you to put up all this money, create this training facility, do this, this, and this, and then I'm going to get you all these sponsors to pay all this money for this stuff. Mm-hmm. So you set up that business model with one team. It's not that hard to go ahead and go around to additional teams to set up that model with other
it's not.
stuff. And what I'm saying is it can very quickly evolve to having a nationwide league.
Yes.
Because you already have everything in place. You already have arenas. You already have owners of sports teams. Why would they not want to own an electronic team?
Because
if they could see that it was profitable. That's what I'm saying. I understand all the hurdles that you got to go through to get to that, but
it's those hurdles that are what are intimidating.
I mean, but the Dallas Cowboys are doing it.
Yeah.
So,
But again, this is barely started. Esports have been a thing for a long time. It's just they've never been this popular up until now. Like,
well, the Dallas Cowboys have never had an electronic sporting training facility, but now they do. And what I'm proposing is if they could just simply take that model to other people and make this happen a lot faster than 20 to 30 years. I don't
yeah,
think
because
it's
the
20 to 30
industry
years.
blew up in 5.
And that's what I'm saying, that with technology and the social media platforms and everything, stuff can be built up very quickly. You can put something together very quickly, and that's all I'm trying to get at is who are these people? Because if it is like you're talking about the gaming industry, it doesn't seem like the gaming industry is trying to really evolve.
No, they're not.
And
Yeah, and that's what I'm
making
saying.
something
Funding
like
has
this
to come
happen.
from an outside source, being
Right.
like those people who actually own the football teams or soccer teams or basketball teams.
Yeah.
Those people have to put in money into this because
Yeah, well, that
otherwise
maybe
they're
that
not
initial
gonna.
that
Yeah,
initial investment. I mean, because they have a lot of the infrastructure that you would need, these arenas.
yeah, and you would just convert them to however these
Exactly.
other people wanted to. Yeah, I
Right.
know that's what I'm saying. It's
Right.
very possible to do this. It's just no one's putting up the money, and that's the issue. The gaming industry doesn't want to because again, they're already seeing they're making so much money off of these microtransactions. They're like, why mess up a good thing
Yeah.
when
I
it's
see
there?
that. I see that.
And then the or the sports managers, whatever they're called, sports sponsors are like,
They're old school.
yeah, they're like, we'll just football's never gonna die.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just like this is ridiculous.
Yeah, but we're in a time where things are changing, and that's what a lot of this podcast is about. Is exploring these changes. Is it? Yeah, you've been accustomed to how things have been for the last 100 years or whatever, but
Things ain't the same.
they're not the same. Things are changing rapidly, and that's why proposing this idea of taking sports from a live event the way we know it.
Into this kind of virtual event.
Yeah, well,
To
going
where-
going from when growing up, you play a sport, you grow up, you like a sport, have a kid, have him go through a sport. That may not be the way things are going to happen nowadays. You, for instance, did not have a sport that you played in, and if you had a kid, it's not likely that you're going to push him to have to play in the sport either. It's like, what for? And so, yeah, we get to this point where the perspective of sporting events is shifting, and now you have this space where you have electronic sporting events, and it's interesting. It's interesting to see because we've been accustomed to this old way of things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the market's heading in a whole new direction.
Yep.
This
I
is
guess it
interesting
wouldn't be.
stuff.
I don't want to get too into it, but would you propose the idea that once things started going to electronic gaming, sporting events, from just playing like with controllers, and I know you're kind of talking about this, but I guess you, in a sense, you would say, or would you agree with the idea that you would be playing like in a whole virtual sense, like where you would get like that physical activity, but
That's
it's
what I've been
just
talking
virtual.
about.
That's
is
what
that
the Oculus.
Yes. Well,
that's,
no. That's what I was proposing. That these arenas.
That's what Oculus would be heading
Oh,
to.
no. Okay, so let me clarify something real quick. So when I was talking about these Oculus people getting these arenas, I didn't mean that they were all going to sit around just like what they've been doing and having these competitions where it's one panel versus another panel. I am saying that when they rent out these arenas, like these football stadiums and stuff like that, they're going to go ahead and redo the arena, essentially, the floor plan, however that's done, and basically put up these obstacles and then have a little, whatever you want to call it, sensor on the roof to where it actually tracks the body movements of everyone. So as they're running and doing stuff, let's say they're shooting each other, because that's a classic video game, 5 versus 5 people, and they're actually running through terrain and they see it differently. We can physically see them, but then we can also look on the screen to see what they're looking at and just get an aerial view of what's going on with them. and you can kind of like track them. So it's like you're kind of monitoring, spectating in a sense.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I was just and you again, like I don't want to get too deep into it, but yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. Like, see, you're seeing it in one sense. I was kind of seeing it a little more so in like if you were having a virtual football game where you had players playing football virtually. What would that look like? Are you just running in place? You know what I'm saying?
I think the sports industry is still going to be there, like football, the way it
I
is
know,
right
but
now.
what I'm saying is, if it was to go virtual, what would it look like? You know what I'm saying?
That,
Like,
as far as
know.
that's
Yeah.
concerned, it would still look like a video game that you would see it on.
Right, but how would it operate? Like, how would you control it if you're not using a controller and you're using like a full body suit? You know what I'm saying? Would you
would
be
just
like
use
running in place or?
No. Like that's still gonna stay like 2D. It's not gonna be a 3D thing.
What do
But
you
there
mean?
are like football, for the most part, if it's gonna be played in a 3D world, it's gonna be played by 3D players. You know what I'm saying?
No.
So like football, the way it is right now, it's still gonna be played the same.
How?
The same way. Like the way
In
you
real
see
life?
it, in real life. The way
Okay,
you see
I'm
it on
talking
TV.
about going virtual.
No, if you go virtual with it, the only thing you're gonna see is just the actual game. You're not going to see people running around in
Right,
place or
but
anything
would
like
they
that.
be running in place?
No, because they would have a controller.
No, if you took the controller away,
You would. I don't think that's one of the ones that would blow
well,
up.
that's what I'm telling you is to foresee how you could essentially get back to playing football, but in a virtual sense. And I was trying to explore the idea of what that may look like.
You just want a hypothetical what if it did? Because what if it did, and again, I don't think it will be, but what it'd be is that you'd have your headset, you'd be in, what is it called? I forgot what the name of it is, but basically it's a little platform, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a circle, you go ahead, you're in this, right? And you have these bungee cords essentially tied to you, so that way you're strapped in, so that way when you're running on this platform, and it's super slippery, so it just gets the motion of which way you're going. Mm-hmm. And so essentially you just do that. That's what you'd be looking at.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't, as a spectator, I don't want to look at that, but I'm saying, like, would it be like people just like running in place, kind of, sort of, and like virtually doing stuff?
Yeah.
But
that's
if you
what
were
it'd be like.
if you're spectating, that's not what you're looking at. You would be looking at the actual
monitors.
Yeah,
through their eyes.
Happening.
Yeah,
right,
through their eyes and stuff.
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you could. That's how it would be. But again, I'm not saying that.
Not that we don't know which way it would go or whatever.
But the biggest
it's
ones,
just to kind of put it out there. Like, imagine if things were.
Yeah, the biggest ones are going to be the first ones to kind of be done like that, where it's actually physical people to be running around in an arena and stuff like that, are going to be like these Call of Duty matches. For those of you who don't play video games,
Is
Call
that
of Duty,
like a first person
it's
shooter?
a first person shooter game.
First-person shooter.
Yeah, and so it'd be these guys jumping around these obstacles.
So they would have to
and,
run around an arena?
Yeah. Basically, it'd be like looking at paintball, but with guns. Because in paintball, you can get shot and be like, I didn't get shot. But in these virtual games, if you get shot, then you die, and then you'd have to walk to where the respawn area was.
That is interesting. I don't know if I could get into that, but yeah, I see where it's heading. It is an interesting idea, though. So yeah, that is a lot, I guess, that we covered about sports. We didn't cover too much about where sports are, because pretty much everybody knows where sports are and how dear sporting events are to them. But exploring where they may be heading electronically is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. But again, like all this stuff is happening.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time. And again, like if you want to see this stuff kind of actually playing out, the things to look at where this kind of headset gaming is taking place is going to be the lightsaber battles, where you go ahead and you see people with the two lightsabers and they have to hit these blocks as they're coming out of them a certain way. That's kind of like the early stages of this thing going off. And then the social experiment is going to be VR chat. So we're not that far from going into a virtual world. And then VR chat, I want to say it's on PlayStation and PC.
Is that what you showed me is basically like a virtual room?
Yeah, it's a virtual room. And so I think now the people are having abilities to create their own rooms. And so
how do you control those? Is that with the headset?
so that can get controlled one of two ways. the cheapest way is that if you just get the headset or you get the cheap, I wouldn't say cheap, but not as expensive headset that Sony provides, you can put your phone in there and see it, I think, that way.
Okay.
Anyways, point being is that it's just a headset, and then you have a controller, right, standard controller, and then you move around with the controller, and you can just see stuff.
Okay,
and
so
move your
you're
head.
still moving it with the controller.
Yeah, or you go ahead and you have the upgraded version of that. You still move around with the controller, but then you have full body movement. So you have like these straps that go onto your joints, and then those will go ahead, like for example, your elbow and your knees, and then you have them on your ankle, and then your waist, I want to say, and then those are kind of like as you move your in-game character moves a lot more
moving,
smoother.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
and so.
Okay,
And then
yeah,
there's
yeah.
just social area where the people just talk.
Yeah, I was
and
just
do
wondering
stuff.
because I mean, I remember it was just something simple, and it was like people just kind of walking around and sitting down, simple functionality. But I was just kind of getting into a little bit of how do you do that? What is it like on being the controller?
Yeah.
You know what
And
is
so these
what
are
is
the
that
early stages. Another thing that people forgot of was going to be, and it's a little bit older technology, but even Xbox, they had this thing called the Kinect, and that basically monitored
movement.
your movement.
Yeah.
So this stuff is possible, and that was without a controller.
Yeah.
Your hands were the controller, and it
Yeah.
recognized your hands and stuff like that.
Right.
And so, again, this stuff can be very easily implemented. It's just
A matter of time.
a matter of time and
Just
funding.
a matter of time and people putting the money behind it. Yeah, very interesting. So, might be looking for another direction of where sports are heading. I guess don't be so optimistic about your kids going
Playing
into
sports,
sports
yeah.
because it could be a matter of time before it's all
Yeah, and here's the
said
thing:
and
you can
done.
play these games anytime, anywhere, with
Yeah.
anyone around.
Right. Yep.
So that's like football. You can only play in the daytime when it's not snowing or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Oh
Not
no. I
raining.
mean, technology. Of course, it's it makes everything possible. I guess
Yeah, these big tech companies could get involved into these esport things. They'd be bigger than the NFL. They would almost have a monopoly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Alrighty. So may not be too long before we see a big shift in gaming. So stay on the lookout and keep gaming.
Get good.
Get good.
Get good.
Sucks to suck.
Don't suck.
Alrighty, guys. Till next time.
See ya.